I still remember the exact moment when my world shattered. It wasn't when my husband Mark died unexpectedly 5 years ago. It wasn't when I had to sell our dream house to pay off medical bills. It wasn't even when I moved across the country to help my son raise his newborn daughter while he built his career. No, it was at my granddaughter Emma's 6th birthday party when I overheard my son introduce me to his new business partners as the Babysitter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 25 years of motherhood, 5 years of essentially co-parenting his child, and that's what I had become, the help. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling of the guest room that had never truly felt like mine, I made a decision that would change everything. But we'll get to that. My name is Diane Reynolds, and at 59, I never expected to be starting over. I'd spent my entire adult life building a small but successful interior design business in Portland while raising my only child, Ryan. When Mark passed away from a sudden heart attack, the grief nearly swallowed me whole. Ryan, living in Chicago with his pregnant wife Vanessa, called every day. "Mom," he'd say, his voice gentle but urgent, "we need you. With the baby coming and both of us working these crazy hours, we just can't do it alone." The timing seemed almost providential. My business had been struggling since the recession. Mark's medical bills had drained our savings, and the house felt too big, too empty, too haunted by memories. So I sold everything: my business, our home with the garden I'd tended for 2 decades, most of our furniture, and moved to Chicago with 2 suitcases and a heart full of hope. When I arrived, Ryan and Vanessa lived in a modest 3-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. The nursery was half painted, baby supplies still in boxes. They both worked at the same marketing agency, Ryan as a creative director and Vanessa in account management. Their lives were a whirlwind of deadlines, client meetings, and networking events. I could see the exhaustion etched on their faces, the quiet panic in their eyes. Emma was born 3 weeks after I arrived, a tiny, perfect thing with Ryan's eyes and Vanessa's dark curls. "Thank God you're here, Mom," Ryan whispered the first night home from the hospital, as I rocked Emma to sleep while they collapsed on the couch. "We couldn't do this without you." It was the "we" that warmed me, made me feel part of something again after months of crushing solitude. I threw myself into grandmothering with the same passion I'd once given my design career. I woke for midnight, feedings, learned the specific bounce and sway that settled Emma's colic, became an expert at one-handed cooking while holding a baby. When Vanessa returned to work after 3 months, I became Emma's primary caregiver. "It's just temporary," Ryan assured me as we converted the 2nd bedroom into my space. "Just until we get on our feet. Then we'll help you get set up with your own place. Maybe restart your business here." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son, the boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with meticulous attention to detail, who called me from college just to describe the sunset he was watching because it reminded me of that time at the coast. Remember, Mom? The first year was exhausting but filled with purpose. I watched Emma learn to smile, to reach, to crawl. I documented every milestone, texting photos to Ryan and Vanessa throughout their workdays. They were grateful, effusive with their thanks. "We hit the jackpot with you, Diane," Vanessa would say, kissing my cheek as she rushed out the door in the morning. Ryan would bring me coffee on Sunday mornings, sit with me and talk about his projects while Emma played between us on the floor. I started to rebuild my savings, carefully setting aside the modest contribution they insisted on giving me each month. It wasn't much, $800 for food, utilities, and my personal expenses. But I was grateful for it. I had my Social Security and what remained from selling the house, carefully invested. It wasn't the retirement Mark and I had planned, but it would be enough, eventually. The trouble began so gradually, I almost didn't notice. First, The contribution started coming later and later each month. Then Vanessa began referring to it as my allowance during conversations with her friends. "We give Diane an allowance so she can buy herself little treats," she'd say, as if I were a child or pet being rewarded for good behavior. It stung, but I swallowed my pride. Family harmony seemed more important than correcting language. Then came the casual comments about my spending. "Mom, do you really need another blouse?" Ryan would ask, eyebrows raised, if I came home from Target with anything for myself. This from a man who thought nothing of dropping $200 on a single client dinner. Vanessa began checking grocery receipts, questioning items she deemed unnecessary. "Organic berries? Emma's too young to know the difference," she'd say, though her own shopping included $50 bottles of wine and premium skincare. By Emma's third birthday, they'd moved to a larger apartment in a trendier neighborhood. My bedroom was now technically a den, smaller, with no door, just a screen they'd picked up at IKEA. "We need the second bedroom as a home office," Ryan explained. "You don't mind, right, Mom? It's cozier this way." What could I say? It was their home, their names on the lease. I began to feel less like family and more like staff. Our dinners together grew less frequent as their social calendar filled. Often, I'd have Emma fed, bathed, and in bed before they returned from whatever networking event or dinner they'd deemed essential. "We have to play the game," Vanessa would explain, not quite meeting my eyes. "This is how careers are built these days." My suggestions about Emma's education or activities were increasingly dismissed. "That's not how parenting works anymore." "Mom," Ryan would say with that patronizing smile I'd come to dread. "We've read the research." These comments usually came after I'd spent hours researching preschools or developmental activities, trying to be helpful, to contribute more than just childcare. The allowance stopped entirely around Emma's fourth birthday. "We're saving for a house," Ryan explained. "We need to tighten our belts. You understand, right? You've got your investments." My investments were meant to sustain me through retirement, not subsidize my adult son's lifestyle. But again, I said nothing. I dipped into my savings, telling myself it was temporary. That family sacrifice goes both ways. When Emma started kindergarten, I expected things to change. With her at school most of the day, perhaps I could find part-time work, rebuild some independence. I tentatively brought it up over dinner one night. "Work? At your age?" Vanessa laughed, not unkindly but with genuine surprise. "Who would hire you? Besides, we need you for school pickup and drop-off. Our schedules are impossible." "Maybe you could do something from home," Ryan suggested more gently. "But honestly, Mom, Emma needs consistency. Having you here full-time is what's best for her." I felt the weight of invisible chains tightening. Best for Emma. How could I argue with that? I love that child with every fiber of my being. The thought of disrupting her routine, of not being there when she got home from school, made my chest ache. So I agreed, settling deeper into a role that felt increasingly confined. The final indignity came in pieces, like a mosaic of disrespect. I only saw once it was complete. Vanessa's parents visited from Boston, wealthy, polished people who made no secret of their belief that Vanessa had married down with Ryan. They stayed at a hotel but spent most days at the apartment. I noticed how differently Vanessa acted around them, more deferential, eager to impress. She began introducing me differently during these visits. "This is Diane," she'd say vaguely, letting the relationship hang undefined. Once, I heard her tell her mother, "It's so helpful having live-in help with Emma. We're very lucky." Live-in help. The words felt like a slap. Then came the birthday party, Emma's 6th. They'd rented a small event space at a children's museum, invited her entire class and their parents, plus colleagues and friends. I spent weeks helping plan it, made the cake myself. Emma had specifically requested Grandma's chocolate cake, not from a store. and arrived early to help set up. The party was in full swing when I overheard it. Ryan was chatting with two men in expensive suits, potential clients I'd gather later. And who's the older lady setting up the craft table? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. One asked. Ryan glanced over at me, hesitated for just a moment, then smiled smoothly. Oh, that's Diane, Emma's babysitter. She's been with us for years, practically family. Babysitter, not my mother, not Emma's grandmother. Babysitter. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I kept arranging glitter and paper on the table, my hands moving automatically while my mind froze. In that moment, I realized with perfect clarity what I had become. A convenience, a household appliance, useful but not essential. Not family enough to claim, not unless it served their narrative. Emma rescued me from total collapse, running over with a paper crown she'd made. Grandma, this is for you, she announced loudly, placing it carefully on my head. Ryan glanced over, his expression flashing briefly with something, embarrassment, guilt, before he turned back to his conversation. I made it through the rest of the party on autopilot. Served cake, helped open gifts, smiled for photos. But inside, something had hardened, a resolve crystallizing with each passing minute. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat in my doorless den and made a list. Not of grievances, those I knew by heart, but of actions. Clear, practical, necessary actions. The next morning, I called an old client from Portland who had moved to Chicago years before me. Caroline had always respected my design work and had once, half-jokingly, offered me a job if I ever relocated. I hadn't taken her up on it when I first arrived, too consumed with helping Ryan and Emma. "Diane!" she exclaimed when she recognized my voice. "It's been ages. How are you?" "Ready for a change," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Is that job offer still open?" It wasn't exactly. Caroline had sold her design firm 2 years prior, but she was starting a new venture in home staging and needed experienced help. "Part-time to start," she cautioned, "but it could grow. When can you come in to talk?" Next, I called a realtor. I had enough saved for a modest down payment on a small condo, maybe in one of the less trendy neighborhoods. "Just exploring options," I told the cheerful woman who answered, "but I'd like to see what's out there." Finally, I called Michael Barnes, an attorney I'd met through one of Emma's school functions. His daughter was in her class, and we'd chatted at pickup several times. He specialized in family law and elder rights. His secretary scheduled a consultation for the following week. I told Ryan and Vanessa nothing of these calls. Instead, I maintained our routine, all while taking careful note of exactly what I did each day. The hours spent on Emma's care, the household tasks I performed, the appointments I managed. I documented everything, creating a detailed log of my contributions. 2 weeks later, I had a part-time job offer from Caroline, a short list of affordable housing options, and a clear understanding of my legal position thanks to Michael. I wasn't without rights, it turned out. 5 years of continuous childcare, verbal agreements about my role and compensation, even text messages promising future support. These created what Michael called a pattern of dependence and implied contract. Not ironclad, but not nothing. "Family cases are always complicated," Michael warned me. "Are you sure you want to take this route? Sometimes just the threat of legal action is enough to change behavior." I thought of Ryan's casual dismissal of my identity, of 5 years feeling increasingly invisible in my own family. "I'm sure," I said. "But I want to try talking to them first. If that fails, then we proceed." I chose a Sunday morning for the conversation, when they were both home and relatively relaxed. Emma was having a play date at a friend's house. I'd arranged it specifically for this purpose. I need to talk to you both, I said, sitting across from them at the kitchen table. About my role here and my future. Ryan looked up from his phone, mildly curious. Vanessa continued scrolling through her tablet, barely acknowledging me. I'm moving out, I said simply. I've taken a part-time job with Caroline Winters. You remember her, Ryan, from Portland? And I'm looking at apartments in Ravenswood. That got their attention. Ryan put his phone down. Vanessa's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Ryan asked, his voice caught between concern and irritation. You can't just leave. What about Emma? I'll still see Emma regularly, I said. I love her, and I'll always be her grandmother. But I need my own life, my own space. Is this about money? Vanessa asked, her tone suggesting this was a tedious, predictable concern. Because we're finally in a good place financially. Once Ryan closes the Peterson account, it's not about money, I interrupted, though of course it partly was. It's about respect. It's about being recognized as a person with my own identity and needs, not just as convenient childcare. What are you talking about? Ryan's confusion seemed genuine, which almost hurt more than if he'd been deliberately cruel. We appreciate everything you do. Do you? I asked quietly. At Emma's birthday party, you introduced me as the babysitter. His face flushed. Vanessa looked away. Neither denied it. I've been living in a den without a door for 2 years, I continued. I haven't received the monthly contribution you promised in over 18 months. I'm expected to be available for childcare at all hours, but am not included in decisions about Emma's life. I'm introduced variously as the help, the babysitter, or not introduced at all. You're being dramatic, Vanessa said, but her voice lacked conviction. I don't think so, I replied. I think I've been incredibly patient, but that patience is gone now. Ryan leaned forward, his expression shifting to the one he used when soothing difficult clients. Mom, come on, we're family. Families help each other. We needed you and you stepped up. That's what family does. Yes, I agreed. Family helps each other, but it's supposed to be reciprocal. What have you done to help me rebuild my life here? What steps have you taken to ensure I have security and independence as I age? Silence stretched between us. Finally, Ryan sighed heavily. What do you want, Mom? Just tell us what you want. It was exactly the opening I needed. I pulled out the folder Michael had helped me prepare. I want 3 things, I said, my voice steady. First, I want a formal acknowledgement of the work. I've done these past 5 years, not as a favor, but as a job. Second, I want compensation for that work, retroactive to when the monthly contribution stopped. At minimum wage, that's approximately $42,000. Vanessa gasped. Ryan's face darkened. You're billing us? For watching your own granddaughter? I'm billing you, I corrected, for providing full-time childcare, household management, and domestic labor under false pretenses. You promised support and partnership. You delivered exploitation. This is insane, Vanessa snapped. We gave you a place to live, food, room and board, I nodded, which I've accounted for in the calculations. It still leaves a substantial balance. And the third thing? Ryan asked, his voice tight. I want a written agreement about my continued relationship with Emma. Regular visits, holiday time, the right to attend school functions, and contribute to decisions about her welfare. Not as a babysitter, but as her grandmother. Ryan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache despite everything. And if we refuse? I slid Michael's business card across the table. Then I'll be pursuing these requests through legal channels with Mr. Barnes representing me. You got a lawyer? The betrayal in Ryan's voice almost broke my resolve. Almost. I did what I needed to do to be taken seriously, I said quietly. just like you do in your business dealings every day. You taught me that, actually, to advocate for my worth. They asked for time to discuss it privately. I agreed and left for a long walk along the lake, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. Had I gone too far? Was I destroying my relationship with my only child? The doubts circled like vultures, but beneath them, a steadier voice reminded me. If the relationship could be destroyed by simply asking for basic dignity, how real was it to begin with? When I returned hours later, they were waiting in the living room. Ryan looked exhausted, Vanessa tight-lipped but composed. "We'll pay you," Ryan said without preamble. "Not the full amount, but a settlement. And we'll sign an agreement about Emma." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by caution. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Vanessa said, her voice clipped. "But we'd appreciate discretion. Our colleagues, our friends, they don't need to know the details." Pride. It was always about appearances with them. Somehow that knowledge made it easier to stand firm. "I have no interest in damaging your reputation," I said. "I just want what's fair." We negotiated over the next few days, with Michael reviewing everything before I signed. The final agreement wasn't perfect, but it was something I could live with. A lump sum payment of $30,000, a clear visitation schedule with Emma, and their assistance in finding suitable housing. 2 months later, I moved into a small but bright one-bedroom apartment in Ravenswood, walking distance from Emma's school. I was working 20 hours a week at Caroline's staging company, with the promise of more responsibility as the business grew. I had my own door that closed, my own kitchen where no one questioned my grocery choices, and a new sense of purpose that had nothing to do with being anyone's mother or grandmother. Ryan was cold at first, our interactions stiff and formal during Emma handoffs. But children have a way of breaking down walls, and it was impossible to stay angry while watching Emma dance around my new living room, exclaiming over the fairy lights I'd strung above the windows and the special drawer I'd filled with art supplies just for her. "Your place is pretty, Grandma," she told me during her first overnight stay. "But why don't you live with us anymore?" I chose my words carefully, because grandmas are people too, with their own lives to live. "But I'll always be here for you. That will never change." 6 months after moving out, Ryan invited me to dinner, just the two of us. Over pasta at a quiet neighborhood restaurant, he finally spoke the words I'd been waiting to hear. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, studying his plate. I didn't see what was happening. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. It was easier to pretend everything was fine, that you were happy with the arrangement because it made our lives easier. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." "Vanessa and I," he hesitated, "we're in counseling. There's a lot we need to work on, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. Dad would be proud too." Later that night, in my own apartment with my own door that locked, I cried for the first time since this all began, not from sadness or anger, but from the pure relief of reclamation. I was Diane Reynolds again, designer, grandmother, woman, not just the babysitter. Next month, I'm taking Emma to Portland for a week to show her where her father grew up, where her grandfather and I built our life together. Ryan and Vanessa are supportive of the trip. It's a small step, but an important one. Family healing happens slowly, in inches rather than miles. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd found my voice sooner, if I'd refused the initial arrangement or set firmer boundaries from the beginning. But dwelling on what might have been is less important than recognizing what is. I'm 60 years old, starting over in many ways, but finally living on my own terms. And that, as it turns out, is worth everything. The words babysitter echoed in my mind for days after Emma's birthday party. I couldn't shake it. How casually Ryan had dismissed our relationship, how I'd been reduced to a job title. That night, I barely slept, staring at the ceiling of my doorless room, listening to the sounds of Vanessa and Ryan talking in hushed tones down the hall. Their voices rose and fell like distant waves, occasionally punctuated by Vanessa's sharp laugh. Were they talking about me? Did they even care how deeply they'd hurt me? Or was I truly invisible to them now? Just another household fixture, as unremarkable as the refrigerator. Morning came with no answers, only a dull headache and a heaviness in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I went through the motions of our morning routine, preparing Emma's lunch, checking her backpack, making sure she had her library books for return day. Ryan and Vanessa rushed through breakfast, both glued to their phones, murmuring about meetings and deadlines. "We'll be late tonight," Vanessa announced, not looking up from her screen. "Dinner with the Hendersons, potential investors." "I'll handle Emma's dinner and bedtime," I said automatically. It wasn't a question anymore, just an assumption. Ryan glanced up briefly. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." The words were right, but something in his tone felt hollow, performative. Had it always been this way? Had I simply been too eager to be needed to notice? After they left and I'd walked Emma to school, I returned to the empty apartment. Usually, I'd fill these hours with household tasks: laundry, meal prep, organizing Emma's ever-expanding art projects. Today, I couldn't bring myself to do any of it. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold and really looked at my surroundings for the first time in months. The apartment was beautiful in a carefully curated way. Expensive. Furniture chosen more for appearance than comfort. Art that matched the color scheme perfectly, but held no emotional resonance. Nothing reflected my taste or presence. Even the family photos on display were ones where I'd been the photographer, not the subject. It was as if I existed adjacent to their lives, not within them. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Once, I'd had a thriving social circle in Portland. Fellow designers, clients who'd become friends, neighbors we'd known for decades. Now, my contact list was dominated by Emma's pediatrician, her school, the parents of her friends. All relationships that existed in service to my role as caregiver. When had I disappeared so completely? The question haunted me as I moved through the apartment, seeing it with new eyes. In the master bathroom, Vanessa's expensive skincare products lined the counter. Serums and creams that cost more than the monthly contribution they'd once given me. In Ryan's closet, designer suits hung neatly, each one representing a week's worth of groceries. They weren't struggling financially. They were thriving. It was just my value that had depreciated. I found myself standing in Emma's room, running my fingers over the bookshelf I'd organized, the curtains I'd sewn by hand. Because she wanted rainbow stars, Grandma, please! Everything in this space contained pieces of my heart, my time, my care. And yet, to Ryan, I was just the babysitter. The revelation didn't come as a dramatic epiphany, but as a slow, painful clarity. I had made myself dispensable by being indispensable, by solving every problem, anticipating every need, sacrificing every boundary. I'd trained them to see me as a function rather than a person. The truth of it knocked the air from my lungs. I sank onto Emma's bed, surrounded by the stuffed animals I'd carefully arranged each morning after she left for school. What would happen if I simply stopped? If I announced tonight that I was leaving, moving into a hotel until I found my own place? The thought sent panic skittering through me. What about Emma? Who would make sure she had clean clothes for school? Who would remember she needed her inhaler on high pollen days? Who would listen to her practice reading with the patience her busy parents rarely demonstrated? That's when I realized the invisible chains that bound me weren't just financial or logistical. They were emotional. I had become so entwined with my granddaughter's daily care that separating myself felt like abandonment. Ryan and Vanessa knew this. Perhaps they even counted on it. I needed to think clearly, strategically. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or family dynamics. This was about my future, my security, my very identity. I'd been a successful professional, once, respected in my field. I'd raised a child, run a household, built a business. Those capabilities hadn't vanished. They'd just been buried under years of accommodation and compromise. Taking a deep breath, I reached for a notebook, one of Emma's school supplies, ironically, and began to make a list. Not of grievances, though those were numerous, but of facts. Cold, unembellished facts that couldn't be dismissed as emotional. Overreaction. I had sold my home and business in Portland at Ryan and Vanessa's request. I had provided full-time childcare for Emma since her birth. I had managed the household, cooking, cleaning, laundry, appointments, without compensation for 5 years. The promised monthly stipend had stopped 18 months ago. I had no lease, no formal agreement about my living situation. I had depleted a significant portion of my retirement savings. The list went on, filling page after page. Seeing it written down transformed the nebulous sense of unfairness into something concrete, undeniable. This wasn't about family obligation or generational differences in child rearing. This was about exploitation, plain and simple. But knowing I'd been wronged didn't automatically illuminate a path forward. I couldn't afford to rent an apartment in Chicago on my Social Security alone. My design skills, while once valuable, had been dormant for years, and the industry had evolved without me. I had no local professional network, no recent portfolio, no references beyond being Emma's grandmother. I closed the notebook, sliding it into my purse before Emma got home from school. This wasn't a problem I could solve in a day, but acknowledging its existence was the first step toward reclaiming my life. That evening, I observed Ryan and Vanessa with new awareness as they prepared for their investor dinner. Vanessa twirled in front of the bedroom mirror, showing off a new dress that still had the price tag tucked in the drawer, $450. Ryan adjusted his cufflinks, a Christmas gift from Vanessa that I'd overheard cost nearly $1,000. "How do I look?" Vanessa asked, not to me but to Ryan. "Perfect," he assured her. "Henderson won't know what hit him." They breezed through the living room where Emma and I were reading, dropping quick kisses on her head. "Be good for Grandma," Ryan said. The irony of using my actual title in private while denying it in public not lost on me. "When will you be back?" Emma asked, her small face pinched with the familiar disappointment of another evening without her parents. "Late, sweetie. You'll be asleep," Vanessa said, already checking her phone. "But we'll have all day Sunday." "Together, promise." The door closed behind them, and Emma leaned against me, her small body warm and trusting. "Can we make cookies, Grandma?" she asked, already knowing the answer would be yes. "Of course," I said, pushing aside my troubled thoughts. Whatever happened next, whatever decisions I made, Emma would remain the innocent center of this complicated web. My love for her was the one pure, uncomplicated element in this entire situation. We made chocolate chip cookies, flour dusting our clothes, Emma giggling as she licked batter from the spoon despite my half-hearted warnings about raw eggs. These were the moments I treasured, the ones that had made the sacrifice seem worthwhile. But now I understood that love and exploitation could coexist in the same relationship, that genuine affection didn't negate unfair treatment. After Emma was asleep, I opened my laptop, the same one I'd had since Portland, now outdated and slow, and began to research. First, I looked up rental prices in Chicago neighborhoods. The numbers made me wince. Even the most modest studio apartments in safe areas were far beyond what I could afford on my own. Next, I researched nanny salaries in Chicago. According to multiple sources, live-in nannies with my hours and responsibilities earned between $45,000 and $65,000 annually, plus benefits. The figure stunned me. Had I really provided services worth that much, for free, for 5 years? Finally, I searched for elder rights and family caregiver exploitation. The search returned thousands of results, including legal resources, support groups, and countless stories similar to mine. I wasn't alone. The realization brought a strange comfort. If others had navigated this path, I could too. One resource particularly caught my attention: a free legal clinic specifically for seniors, hosted weekly at a community center not far from Emma's school. I marked the date on my calendar, next Tuesday, 1 p.m. I'd need to figure out a way to attend while Emma was at school, to keep my research private until I had a clearer plan. Sleep came easier that night, despite my uncertain future. Having a direction, even a tentative one, eased some of the heaviness in my chest. The next morning, I noticed a text notification on my phone while preparing Emma's breakfast. It was from Caroline Winters, my former client from Portland who'd relocated to Chicago years before me. We'd lost touch after my move, both busy with our separate lives. The text was simple. "Diane, heard you're in Chicago these days. Let's catch up? Coffee soon?" A coincidence that felt like fate. I replied immediately, suggesting the following afternoon during Emma's art class. Caroline agreed, and just like that, a small window of possibility opened. We met at a cafe near the art studio where Emma spent Thursday afternoons. Caroline looked exactly as I remembered: elegant, sharp-eyed, her silver-streaked hair cut in a precise bob. She hugged me warmly, then held me at arm's length, studying my face. "You look tired, Diane," she said, never one to mince words. "Are you sleeping?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly undid me. When was the last time someone had inquired about my well-being? Not as it related to Emma or the household, but just me, as a person with my own needs and struggles. "It's been a challenging few years," I admitted as we settled at a corner table. "Rewarding in many ways, but challenging." Caroline nodded, sipping her espresso. "I heard about Mark." "I'm so sorry." And then the move to help with Ryan's baby. "How old is she now?" 6, I said, smiling despite everything. "Emma, she's remarkable, creative, curious, kind. Just like her grandmother," Caroline said, then frowned slightly. "But something's wrong. I can see it in your face, Diane. What's going on?" Perhaps it was the unexpected kindness, or simply the relief of speaking to someone who knew me as more than Emma's grandmother, but the whole story came pouring out. The initial arrangement, the gradually shifting expectations, the financial strain, and finally, the birthday party incident. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears at this point, but my voice shook with suppressed emotion. Caroline listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This is elder abuse, Diane," she said quietly but firmly. "Financial and emotional exploitation. It's not okay." "Abuse seems like a strong word," I hedged, the ingrained habit of making excuses for Ryan still strong. "They're under a lot of pressure, building their careers." "Stop!" Caroline held up her hand. "I've known you for what? 15 years? You were one of the most respected designers in Portland. You ran a successful business through the recession, when half our colleagues went under. You're intelligent, talented, and diligent, and they're treating you like an unpaid servant." Put so bluntly, I couldn't deny the truth of it. But acknowledging the problem didn't solve it. What can I do, though? I can't afford to live independently in Chicago. My design skills are rusty at best, and the industry has changed dramatically. Caroline's eyes narrowed, the same look she used to get when tackling a particularly challenging design problem. "First of all, your skills aren't as rusty as you think. Design principles don't change, even if trends do. Second," she leaned forward, "I might have a proposition for you." After selling her design firm, Caroline explained, She had moved into the growing field of home staging, preparing houses for sale by strategically furnishing and decorating them to appeal to potential buyers. Business was booming, especially in certain Chicago neighborhoods, and she was looking to expand. "I need someone with your eye, your experience with spatial relationships and color theory," she said. "Start part-time, working around Emma's schedule. If needed, see if it's a good fit." Hope flickered to life in my chest. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to remember who you are," Caroline corrected. "The salary won't be what you made at the height of your business, at least not initially. But it would be a start, a way back to independence." We spent the next hour discussing possibilities, logistics, timelines. By the time I needed to leave to pick up Emma, we had the outline of a plan. I would start shadowing Caroline the following week, just a few hours while Emma was at school, to see if the work suited me. If it did, we would gradually increase my hours as I figured out my living situation. It wasn't a complete solution. I still needed to address the legal and financial aspects of my situation with Ryan and Vanessa. But it was a critical first step. As Caroline hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "You're stronger than you remember, Diane. You built a life once. You can do it again." Walking to Emma's art class, I felt lighter than I had in months. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught, with potential conflict and difficulty, but no longer seemed entirely blocked. I had options, possibilities, a glimpse of a future where I existed as more than an extension of someone else's needs. Emma bounded out of her class, paint smeared across her cheek, proudly clutching a watercolor of what might have been a cat or possibly a very peculiar tree. "Grandma, look what I made. Ms. Lena says I have a distinct style," she announced, pronouncing the phrase carefully. "It's beautiful," I said sincerely, marveling as always at how she saw the world in her own unique way. "Let's get it home and find the perfect spot to display it." As we walked hand in hand, Emma chattering about her art class and the friend who had shared her snack, I found myself studying her more closely than usual. She had Ryan's dark eyes and determined chin, but her expressive hands and quick laugh reminded me of Mark. She was the best of all of us, this child who bridged generations, who carried our shared history forward. Whatever happened next, whatever, difficult conversations and decisions lay ahead. I would make sure Emma understood one immutable truth. My love for her existed independently of any conflict with her parents. I was reclaiming my identity, not abandoning my role in her life. The following Tuesday, I made my way to the senior legal clinic, having arranged for a neighbor to pick Emma up from school with the excuse of a doctor's appointment. The community center was bright and welcoming. The waiting area filled with people similar to me in age but diverse in every other way. A volunteer directed me to a small office where Michael Barnes sat reviewing documents. He looked up when I entered, offering a firm handshake and a kind smile. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm Michael. Please have a seat and tell me what brings you here." Today. I'd prepared extensively for this conversation, bringing my notebook full of facts and figures, bank statements showing my depleted savings, even a rough calendar documenting my childcare hours over the past 5 years. But when I tried to speak, my carefully organized thoughts scattered like leaves in a strong wind. "I'm not sure where to begin," I admitted, hands twisting nervously in my lap. "The beginning usually works," Michael suggested gently. "Take your time." So I did. I started with Mark's death, the sale of our Portland home, the move to Chicago at Ryan and Vanessa's request. I detailed the gradual shift in our arrangement, the increasingly uneven distribution of responsibilities and resources, the stopped payments, the shrinking living space, and finally, the birthday party incident. Michael listened attentively, occasionally making notes but mostly just letting me speak uninterrupted. When I finished, he sat back, tapping his pen thoughtfully against his legal pad. "Mrs. Reynolds. Diane, please." Diane, he amended, with a nod. What you're describing is unfortunately common, especially among family caregivers. People assume that because care is provided out of love, it doesn't have value in other ways. But that's simply not true, legally or ethically. He explained that while family law was complex and varied by state, certain principles remained consistent. Verbal agreements, especially when followed by years of consistent action, could be legally binding. The concept of promissory estoppel might apply. Essentially, I had made significant life changes based on promises that were later broken. Additionally, Michael continued, there's the matter of what's called quantum meruit, the reasonable value of services provided. Even without a formal contract, you're entitled to fair compensation for work performed in good faith. The legal terminology was unfamiliar, but the underlying principle resonated deeply. My time and labor had value, regardless of familial relationships. What are my options? I asked, feeling more grounded than I had in weeks. Michael outlined several possibilities, ranging from formal negotiation with Ryan and Vanessa to legal action if necessary. He recommended starting with a clear, documented request for what I believed I was owed, including back pay for services, assistance with securing independent housing, and a formal agreement regarding my continued relationship with Emma. The goal isn't to punish your son, Michael emphasized. It's to establish appropriate boundaries and ensure your financial security. Family relationships can recover from these kinds of reckonings, but often not without them. I left the consultation with a detailed plan of action and Michael's card in my pocket, in case further legal guidance became necessary. Walking back to the apartment, not home, I realized it had never really been home, I felt both terrified and exhilarated. The path ahead would be difficult, potentially painful, but it was a path toward reclaiming my dignity and securing my future. Over the next week, I began laying groundwork carefully. I shadowed Caroline for 3 afternoons, discovering that my design instincts remained sharp despite years of disuse. Home staging suited me. It combined my eye for space and color with practical problem solving, transforming empty houses into inviting potential homes. You're a natural, Caroline remarked after watching me rearrange a living room setup that had been feeling flat and uninspired. Your sense of balance and flow is still impeccable. The compliment warmed me in a way I hadn't experienced in years. This was a recognition of my skills, my professional abilities, something entirely separate from my role as mother or grandmother. Meanwhile, I continued documenting everything, creating a paper trail that couldn't be dismissed as emotional or exaggerated. I calculated the market value of my childcare services over 5 years, minus fair compensation for room and board. I researched affordable housing options within a reasonable distance of Emma's school. I drafted a formal visitation schedule that would allow me to maintain my relationship with Emma, while establishing healthy boundaries with Ryan and Vanessa. I also quietly began packing, sorting through the few possessions I'd brought from Portland, identifying what was truly important to keep and what could be discarded. The process was cathartic, a physical manifestation of the mental sorting I'd been doing. During this time, I maintained our normal routine with Emma, cherishing our afternoons together with a new awareness of their preciousness. I watched her more closely, memorizing the way she twisted her hair when concentrating, the particular giggle that meant she was being mischievous, the serious furrow of her brow when she encountered a difficult word in her reading. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those wise, dark eyes and asked, "Grandma, are you sad?" The question caught me off guard. Had I been so transparent, or was she simply more perceptive than I'd realized? "Sometimes," I answered, honestly. "Everyone feels sad sometimes." She nodded sagely. "Is it because Daddy called you the babysitter at my party? I heard him telling those men. But you're not the babysitter. You're my grandma." My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. Of course she had noticed, Children miss nothing, especially not the dynamics between the adults they love. Yes, that made me a little sad, I admitted, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes in how they speak about each other. Emma frowned, considering this. You should tell Daddy that made you sad. When Zoe at school said my drawing was stupid, Ms. Torres made me tell her that hurt my feelings, and she said sorry. The simplicity of her solution, direct communication, acknowledgement of harm, apology, struck me with its clarity. That's very wise advice, I said, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. I'll think about it. But as I left her room, I knew the situation had moved beyond simple hurt feelings that could be resolved with an apology. The issue wasn't just what Ryan had said at the party. It was the years of incremental disrespect and exploitation that had led to that moment. Addressing it would require more than a conversation about feelings. It would require fundamental changes to our arrangement, our expectations, our very relationship. Still, Emma's innocent perception served as a reminder that whatever happened next would affect her too. She was watching, learning, absorbing the way we treated each other. What lessons did I want her to take from this situation? That love meant endless sacrifice? That family could exploit family without consequence? Or that healthy relationships required mutual respect, clear boundaries, and honest communication, even when difficult? The answer was obvious, but the path to demonstrating it remained daunting. The morning I decided to confront Ryan and Vanessa dawned cold and sharp, sunlight slicing through the blinds like something with intent. I'd chosen this day carefully, a Saturday when both would be home, when Emma had a playdate scheduled with her friend Zoe, when there would be hours of uninterrupted time for whatever fallout might come. I'd rehearsed my words countless times in the mirror, practiced keeping my voice steady and my expression calm. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about restoration of my dignity, my security, my sense of self. I made breakfast. As usual, pancakes shaped like animals for Emma, who squealed with delight at the elephant with blueberry eyes. Ryan wandered in, sleep-rumpled and checking his phone even before his first sip of coffee. Vanessa followed shortly after, already dressed in yoga clothes, though she rarely actually went to class anymore. Zoe's mom will be here at 10, I reminded. Them, sliding a plate of regular pancakes toward the adults. She's taking the girls to that new children's museum and then for ice cream. They should be back around 4. Ryan nodded absently. Vanessa murmured something that might have been thanks while scrolling through her Instagram feed. The familiar dismissal no longer stung as it once had. I understood now that their behavior reflected their limitations, not my worth. After Emma left, bubbling with excitement about the museum's new butterfly garden, I waited until Ryan and Vanessa had settled. In the living room, Ryan with his laptop, Vanessa flipping through a fashion magazine. Taking a deep breath, I moved to sit across from them, my posture deliberately straight, hands folded calmly in my lap. I need to talk to you both, I said, pleased that my voice emerged clear and unwavering. It's important, and I'd appreciate your full attention. Something in my tone must have registered, because Ryan actually closed his laptop. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, but she set the magazine aside. "What's up, Mom?" Ryan asked, his expression a mix of concern and wariness. I'd prepared a speech, carefully crafted with Michael's help. But in that moment, the direct approach felt more authentic. "I can't continue living here under the current arrangement," I said simply. "It's not sustainable for me financially, physically, or emotionally." Ryan blinked, surprise evident in his face. "What are you talking about? Is something wrong?" The genuine confusion in his voice nearly derailed me. Did he truly not see it? Had the slow erosion of my role from mother and grandmother to unpaid servant been so gradual that he hadn't noticed? "Many things are wrong," I said quietly. "For the past 5 years, I've provided full-time childcare for Emma and managed the household without proper compensation or recognition. The monthly contribution you initially promised stopped over a year ago. I've depleted a significant portion of my retirement savings. I have no formal agreement protecting my housing situation or relationship with Emma. And I paused, meeting Ryan's gaze directly. At Emma's birthday party, you introduced me to your colleagues as the babysitter, not as your mother. Ryan's face flushed. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. The moment stretched between us, taut with unspoken emotions. "Mom, come on," Ryan finally said, his voice taking on that placating tone he used with difficult clients. "You know we appreciate everything you do. Things have been tight financially, but we're family. We help each other. That's what family does." "Yes," I agreed. "Family helps each other, but help should be reciprocal, not exploitative. And frankly, your financial situation isn't nearly as tight as you've led me to believe." Vanessa's head snapped up at that, her eyes flashing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met her gaze calmly. "It means I've seen the credit card statements that come to this address. The designer clothes, the expensive dinners, the weekend getaways. You're not struggling. You're prioritizing your lifestyle over my financial security." "You're going through our mail?" Vanessa's voice rose indignantly. "I'm sorting it, as I do every day along with the laundry, the cooking, the cleaning, and the childcare," I replied steadily. "And that's exactly my point. My labor has become invisible to you both, expected, but not valued." Ryan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my heart clenched despite everything. "What do you want, Mom? Just tell us what you want." I reached for the folder I'd prepared and placed on the coffee table between us. "I want 3 things," I said, echoing the clear framework Michael had suggested. "First, I want a formal acknowledgement of the work I've done these past 5 years. Second, I want fair compensation for that work, particularly from the point when the monthly contributions ceased. And third, I want a written agreement regarding my continued relationship with Emma once I move into my own place." Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "You're moving out? Where? When? What about Emma?" "I've been offered a job with Caroline Winters. You remember her from Portland. She started a home staging business here in Chicago and needs someone with my design background. I'll be looking for an apartment in Ravenswood, close enough to still see Emma regularly." "A job?" Ryan repeated, as if the concept of me working was somehow foreign. "But you're—" "I'm what, Ryan?" I asked quietly. "Too old? Too out of touch? Or just too convenient right where I am?" He had the grace to look ashamed. Vanessa, however, was less restrained. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We gave you a place to live, food, everything you needed. You're acting like we've kept you. Prisoner or something." "Not a prisoner," I corrected. "An unpaid servant. There's a difference, albeit a subtle one." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It isn't fair. That's precisely why we're having this conversation." Ryan leaned forward, his expression shifting to something more calculating. "Let's say you're right, just for argument's sake. What exactly do you think we owe you?" "You're talking about compensation. What number did you have in mind?" I opened the folder and removed a neatly typed document. "I've calculated the market rate for full-time childcare in Chicago, as well as household management services, minus fair compensation for room and board. The total for the entire 5 years would be approximately $176,000. Ryan nearly choked. $176,000? You can't be serious." "I've documented everything," I said, sliding the paper toward him. "Hours worked, services provided, market rates. I'm not asking for the full amount, though legally I would be entitled to it. I'm proposing a settlement of $45,000, which would cover the period since the monthly contributions stopped, plus provide enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a modest apartment. This is insane, Vanessa interjected, her voice rising. We don't have that kind of money just lying around. You have a combined income of over $250,000 per year, I stated calmly. You spent $4,000 on your last vacation to Miami. You're not destitute. Ryan stared at me, his expression unreadable. And if we refuse? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. This was the moment I dreaded, the point of no return. I withdrew Michael's business card and placed it on top of the documents. Then I'll be pursuing these requests through legal channels, with Mr. Barnes representing me. You got a lawyer? The betrayal in Ryan's voice was palpable. I did what I needed to do to be taken seriously, I replied, my voice softening slightly. Just as you would in any business negotiation. This isn't about hurting you, Ryan. It's about ensuring I can support myself as I age. Vanessa grabbed the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Michael Barnes? Wait, isn't he Emma's classmate's father? The guy from the school fundraiser? I nodded. He specializes in family law and elder rights. So our private business is going to be all over Emma's school? Vanessa's voice had taken on a shrill edge. God, the embarrassment. Michael is a professional, I interrupted. He understands confidentiality. But yes, if this proceeds to legal action, certain aspects may become more public than we'd all prefer. Ryan stood abruptly, pacing the living room with agitated steps. I can't believe this. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Ryan? I asked softly. Since I moved to Chicago, what support have you provided for my well-being, my future? When was the last time you asked how I was doing, what I needed, what my plans were? He stopped pacing, the question seeming to genuinely confound him. You're my mother, he said finally, as if that explained everything. Yes, I am, and that should entitle me to more consideration, not less. The silence that followed was dense with unspoken emotions, Ryan's confusion and betrayal, Vanessa's anger and embarrassment, my own complex mix of determination and grief. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Parents shouldn't have to demand basic respect from their children. Families shouldn't require legal intervention to treat each other fairly. We need time to discuss this, Ryan said finally, his voice strained. I nodded, rising from my seat. Of course, I'll give you privacy, but I'll need an answer by the end of the week. As I turned to leave, Vanessa's voice stopped me. Was any of it real? She asked, something vulnerable breaking through her usual polished facade. The help with Emma, the cooking, all of it. Was it just work to you? Or did you actually care? The question stunned me with its fundamental misunderstanding. Vanessa, I said gently, the fact that I love Emma, love all of you, is precisely why this is so painful. Love and exploitation aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, love often makes exploitation possible because the person being taken advantage of doesn't want to disrupt the relationship. I left them sitting there, staring at the folder that contained the clinical accounting of 5 years' worth of care, love, and sacrifice, reduced to hourly rates and market values. It felt wrong, somehow, to quantify what should have been freely given and gratefully received. But they had left me no choice. I spent the afternoon in my den-turned bedroom, door screen firmly closed, though it provided little actual privacy. Through the thin walls, I could hear Ryan and Vanessa's voices rise and fall, occasional words breaking through clearly enough to follow the contours of their argument. Vanessa's initial outrage, Ryan's dawning recognition, calculations of finances, discussions of options. My name, repeated again and again in tones ranging from angry to confused, to, finally, resigned. I didn't cry. There had been enough tears over the past 5 years, shed quietly into pillows late at night when the loneliness felt most acute. Now, all I felt was a strange, detached calm, the calm of someone who has finally spoken their truth after years of silence. When Emma returned from her playdate, pink-cheeked and chattering about butterflies and ice cream, I slipped seamlessly back into my role as grandmother. We made dinner together, her small hands helping to knead the dough for pizza. We read her current favorite book, a story about a girl who could talk to animals. I tucked her in, sang the lullaby she still requested, even though she insisted she was too old for baby songs. Ryan and Vanessa remained closeted in their bedroom, emerging only briefly for Emma's bedtime routine before retreating again. The tension in the apartment was palpable, a living thing that pressed against the walls and ceiling. But Emma, with a child's remarkable ability to adapt, seemed not to notice, or at least not to question it. The next morning, Sunday, brought a strange, strained normality. We ate breakfast together, Ryan and Vanessa unnaturally polite, their voices too bright, their smiles not reaching their eyes. Emma promised a trip to the park, bounced with excitement, oblivious to the undercurrents of adult conflict. "We'll talk after Emma goes to bed," Ryan murmured to me as he rinsed his breakfast plate. "We've been thinking about what you said." I nodded, relieved that at least they weren't dismissing my concerns outright. "Thank you." The day stretched, endlessly, filled with forced cheerfulness and careful avoidance of anything substantive. We took Emma to the park as promised, watched her scramble over jungle gyms and race down slides. We had lunch at her favorite burger place, where Ryan insisted on paying for my meal with an awkward formality that would have been comical under different circumstances. By the time Emma was finally asleep, exhausted from her day of activity, I felt wrung out, my emotional reserves depleted. Still, I squared my shoulders as I joined Ryan and Vanessa in the living room. Whatever came next, I would face it with dignity. Ryan looked haggard, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. Vanessa sat stiffly beside him, her face a careful blank. Between them on the coffee table lay the folder I had prepared, now annotated with their own notes and calculations. "We've been talking," Ryan began, his voice rough, "about everything you said yesterday." I waited, saying nothing, giving him space to continue. "At first I was angry. It felt like you were commodifying our relationship, turning family into a business transaction." He rubbed his hand across his face. But then I started really thinking about it. About what it's been like for you these past 5 years. About how little we've considered your needs, your future. "Mom," he continued, his voice catching slightly, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that we've taken you for granted, that we've benefited from your sacrifices without acknowledging them. It wasn't intentional, but that doesn't make it right." The apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, loosened something in my chest. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words until they were spoken. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." "We can't do the full amount you asked for all at once," Ryan continued, more practical now. "But we can manage $30,000 immediately, and the rest in monthly installments over the next year. We've worked out a budget, cutting back on some non-essentials." He glanced meaningfully at Vanessa, who pressed her lips together but nodded. "That would be acceptable," I said, relief washing through me. I hadn't been certain they would agree to any financial compensation, let alone an amount so close to what I'd requested. "As for the housing situation," Ryan continued, "we'd like to help you find a place. Maybe something in our building or nearby. That way you could still see Emma regularly." "I've actually already started looking," I admitted. "Caroline, my new employer, has a colleague who's renting a 1-bedroom in Ravenswood. It's small, but it's within my budget, especially with the settlement, and it's only a 15-minute walk from Emma's school. Ryan looked surprised, perhaps, at the evidence that I'd been planning so concretely without his knowledge. That could work. When would you want to move? As soon as possible, I said honestly. The apartment will be available at the beginning of next month. Vanessa spoke for the first time, her voice tight but controlled. What about Emma? She's used to having you here every day. This will be a huge adjustment for her. It was a fair question, one I'd agonized over myself. I'd like to establish a regular schedule, I said. Maybe I could pick her up from school 3 days a week, and she could stay with me 1 weekend a month? That way, she knows she can count on seeing me, but we all have some independence too. Ryan nodded slowly. We can make that work. We'll need to hire someone for the other 2 days, but... He trailed off, perhaps realizing for the first time the true value of what I'd been providing all these years. I can help you find someone suitable, I offered. I know what Emma's routines are, what she needs. Thank you, Ryan said. The words weighted with more than just gratitude for this specific offer. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. There's something else we should discuss, she said, glancing at Ryan as if seeking permission. About what you overheard at Emma's party. My stomach tightened. Despite everything we'd discussed, that moment of casual dismissal still hurt, a wound that felt fresh and raw. I know Ryan introduced you as Emma's babysitter, Vanessa continued. That was wrong, hurtful, and completely inaccurate. But you should know. There was context. Ryan winced, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The men I was talking to, they're potential investors for a new project. Very traditional. Very judgmental about certain things. What kinds of things? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. They make comments sometimes about men who need their mother's help, who aren't man enough to handle their families on their own, Ryan explained, his voice low with embarrassment. It's toxic, I know that. But these guys control millions in potential funding. When they asked about you, I just took the easy way out. I'm not proud of it. The explanation didn't erase the hurt, but it provided a frame of reference I hadn't had before. Ryan's action hadn't been about me, not really. It had been about his own insecurities, his fear of being judged by men whose approval he sought. I understand, I said finally. I don't agree with your choice, but I understand it. Relief washed across his face. Thank you, and I promise it won't happen again. No matter who I'm talking to, you are my mother and Emma's grandmother, and I'm proud of that. We spent the next hour hammering out details, financial arrangements, timelines for my move, schedules for Emma. By the time we finished, the atmosphere had shifted from tense confrontation to something approaching collaborative problem-solving. Not perfect, not entirely healed, but a beginning. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. The path ahead would still be challenging, starting a new job in my late 50s, living alone for the first time in decades, establishing boundaries while maintaining close relationships. But for the first time in too long, the future held promise rather than just obligation. A soft knock on my room divider interrupted my thoughts. "Mom?" Ryan's voice hesitant. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I said, sitting up on my bed. He entered awkwardly, too large for the small space, and perched on the edge of my reading chair. For a moment, he just looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "I've been thinking about something. You said yesterday," he began, "about how I've never asked about your plans, your needs. And you're right. I just assumed you were content with things as they were, because it was convenient for me to believe that. I never stopped to consider what you might want beyond being Emma's grandmother." The admission, so honest and unguarded, touched me deeply. "Thank you for recognizing that," I said softly. "So I'm asking now," he continued. "Not just about the job with Caroline or the apartment, but what do you want, Mom? For yourself? For your future? What dreams did you set aside when you came here?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been subsumed by others' needs that I hardly knew anymore. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted. "I need time to rediscover that. But I know I want to feel purposeful again, to use my skills, to have friendships and interests outside of this family unit. I want to travel eventually, maybe go back to Portland to visit old friends. I paused, searching for the right words. "I want to remember who I am beyond being your mother and Emma's grandmother." Ryan nodded slowly. "That makes sense, and you deserve that, all of it." He stood, hesitated, then bent to kiss my cheek, a gesture so reminiscent of his childhood self that my eyes stung with sudden tears. "Good night, Mom, and thank you for everything." After he left, I sat in the quiet room, touching my cheek where he had kissed it. Perhaps, I thought with cautious hope, we could rebuild something honest and healthy from these broken pieces. Not what we had before, that was gone, and perhaps had never been as solid as I'd imagined. But something new, built on clearer understanding and genuine respect. Tomorrow would bring practical tasks, calling Caroline to accept the job formally, contacting the landlord about the apartment, beginning to pack my few belongings. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply sit with the knowledge that I had spoken, my truth and been heard. It wasn't perfect resolution, but it was a beginning, the first step on a path back to myself. The keys to my new apartment felt impossibly heavy in my palm, though they were just ordinary metal. I stood alone in the empty living room, afternoon light streaming through uncovered windows, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floors. One bedroom, one bathroom, a compact kitchen, and this modest living space. All mine. Only mine. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. "What do you think?" Caroline asked from the doorway, her voice gentle as if sensing my emotional turbulence. "It's perfect," I said, and meant it despite the apartment's obvious limitations. The kitchen was dated, the bathroom cramped, the bedroom barely large, enough for a queen-sized bed and dresser. But the windows were large, the ceilings high, and most importantly, there was a door I could close, a space that belonged solely to me. "The neighborhood is safe, walkable," Caroline continued, stepping inside. "There's a great little cafe 2 blocks down. The owner's a character, makes the best almond croissants this side of Paris." I nodded, trying to absorb these details, to picture myself as part of this new landscape. For 5 years, my world had contracted to Ryan and Vanessa's apartment, Emma's school, the nearby park. The idea of exploring, of establishing new routines in new places, felt almost overwhelming. "The security deposit cleared this morning," Caroline said. "It's officially yours as of today. When will you move your things?" "This weekend," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Ryan's renting a small truck. It won't take long. I don't have much." That was an understatement. After 5 years living in someone else's space, my possessions had dwindled to clothing, books, a few cherished photographs, and personal mementos. Everything else that defined daily life, furniture, kitchenware, linens, belonged to Ryan and Vanessa. "About that," Caroline said, a hint of conspiracy in her voice. "I have a storage unit full of staging furniture, premium pieces that clients loved but didn't quite fit their final design. They're just gathering dust. You could borrow whatever you need until you get settled." The offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It wasn't just the practicality, though that was significant. It was the thoughtfulness. The proactive kindness without expectation of return. Something I'd experienced too rarely in recent years. I couldn't possibly, I began. You absolutely could, Caroline interrupted. Firmly, it would be doing me a favor, honestly. The storage fees are ridiculous and these pieces deserve to be used. I acquiesced with a grateful nod, not trusting my voice. Caroline smiled, understanding without words, and began mentally inventorying the space, her designer's eye measuring and calculating. We'll need a sofa. I have a perfect dove gray sectional that would work here. A coffee table, end tables, lamps. Oh, and there's a lovely queen bed frame with an almost new mattress. We staged the Morgan house with it last fall, remember? I didn't remember. I hadn't been working with her then, but I nodded anyway, caught up in her enthusiasm. For the next hour, we planned the apartment's layout, Caroline sketching rough furniture placements on a notepad while I absorbed the reality that this was happening. I was starting over at 59. Later, as we locked up the empty apartment and headed to lunch, Caroline asked the question I'd been avoiding. Have you told Emma yet? My heart tightened. Not exactly. She knows something's changing. She's too perceptive not to notice the packing, the hushed conversations. But Ryan and Vanessa wanted to wait until things were definite before explaining it properly. And now they are definite, Caroline observed. How do you think she'll take it? I sighed, the weight of this particular worry familiar and heavy. She'll be confused, upset initially. Her whole life has been the four of us under one roof. But she's resilient, and we've worked out a consistent schedule for her to spend time with me. 3 afternoons a week, 1 weekend a month to start. It's not the daily contact we've had, but it's regular, predictable. That's what matters most to children her age. And to adults, if we're honest, Caroline added with gentle understanding. She was right, of course. The certainty of when I would see Emma was as much for my benefit as for my granddaughter's. The thought of going from daily immersion in her life to scheduled visits left an ache in my chest that no amount of newfound independence could entirely soothe. We reached the cafe Caroline had mentioned, a charming corner spot with bistro, tables spilling onto the sidewalk. As we settled with our coffees and sandwiches, Caroline steered the conversation toward more practical matters. You're starting officially with me on Monday, she said. Just part-time to begin with, as we discussed. 3 houses coming up for staging next week. A Victorian in Lincoln Park, a modern condo downtown, and a family home in Oak Park. Diverse styles, good projects to sink your teeth into. The prospect of meaningful work, of applying skills long dormant, sent a small thrill through me. I've been brushing up, I admitted. Reading design blogs, studying current trends. Things have evolved since I was active in Portland. Caroline smiled. The fundamentals never change. Proportion, balance, color theory. The rest is just details you'll pick up quickly. Besides, she added with a wink, your outdated aesthetic is what everyone's clamoring for now. Vintage is in. You're accidentally trendy. The joke landed as intended, easing some of the tension I'd been carrying. We spent the rest of lunch discussing business, billing practices, client expectations, the particular challenges of staging versus traditional design. It felt good, this immersion in professional conversation, being valued for my expertise rather than my availability. By the time I returned to Ryan and Vanessa's apartment, not home, not anymore, the afternoon was fading into early evening. Emma would be returning from her after-school science program soon, and we had agreed that tonight was the night to explain the changes to her. I steeled myself for what would likely be a difficult conversation. Ryan arrived with Emma at the usual time, her small voice chattering about volcanoes and chemical reactions as they entered. She spotted me in the kitchen and bounded over, wrapping her arms around my waist in a fierce hug. Grandma! We made things explode. Well, not really explode, but fizz up super high like whoosh. Her hands flew upward, illustrating the dramatic fizzing. "That sounds incredible," I said, smoothing her hair and savoring the uninhibited affection that might soon become less frequent. "Why don't you wash up before dinner? We're having your favorite pasta tonight." Emma dashed off to the bathroom, still narrating her scientific adventures. Ryan caught my eye, his expression a mixture of resolve and apprehension. "Vanessa should be home any minute," he said quietly. "We'll talk to Emma after dinner, as we planned." I nodded, turning back to the pasta sauce I was stirring. We had agreed this was the best approach. A family dinner followed by a carefully framed explanation. Emma would have questions, possibly tears, but she would be surrounded by the 3 adults who loved her most in the world, all presenting a united front despite our complicated dynamics. Dinner proceeded with forced normalcy, all of us working a bit too hard at casual conversation. Emma, perceptive as always, glanced between us with increasing suspicion. "Why is everyone being weird?" she asked finally, setting down her fork, with the directness only a 6-year-old can muster. Ryan exchanged glances with Vanessa, who nodded slightly. "Actually, sweetie," he began, "we do have something important to talk to you about after dinner." Emma's eyes widened. "Am I in trouble? Because if it's about the glitter in the heating vent, that was an accident. I was making a fairy trap, and it just kind of whooshed." The unexpected confession startled a genuine laugh from all of us, momentarily breaking the tension. "You're not in trouble," I assured her. "It's about a change that's happening in our family." Her small face grew serious. "What kind of change?" "Let's finish dinner first," Vanessa interjected smoothly. "Then we'll go sit in the living room and explain everything properly." Emma nodded reluctantly, but her appetite had clearly diminished. She pushed pasta around her plate, stealing glances at each of our faces as if trying to decipher the adult mystery before it was revealed. After dinner, we settled in the living room, Emma perched between Ryan and Vanessa on the sofa, me in the armchair opposite. There was a moment of hesitation, each adult waiting for another to begin. Finally, Ryan took a deep breath. "Emma, you know how Grandma came to live with us when you were born, to help take care of you while Mom and I worked?" Emma nodded, her dark eyes solemn and watchful. "Well, now that you're older and in school most of the day, Grandma is ready for a change. She's going to be moving into her own apartment and starting a new job." Emma's brow furrowed, processing this information. "But why can't she work and still live here?" The innocent question hung in the air, exposing the artifice of our carefully constructed explanation. We had agreed to frame my move as a positive step forward, not as the result of years of accumulated tension and disrespect. But Emma, with a child's unerring instinct for emotional truth, had immediately identified the logical gap. "Sometimes adults need their own space," Vanessa offered. "Just like you need your own bedroom for your things, Grandma needs a place that's just hers." Emma considered this, then turned to me, her expression painfully earnest. "Don't you like living with us anymore?" My heart constricted. "I love you more than anything in the world," I said, choosing my words carefully. "And I've loved being part of your everyday life. But yes, I do need a space of my own now. It doesn't mean I'm going away. I'll still see you all the time. I'll still pick you up from school. We'll have special sleepovers at my new place. It will be different, but not less." "Where is your new place? Is it far away?" The worry in her voice was palpable. "It's very close," I reassured her. "Only a 15-minute walk from your school. Remember that park with the duck pond we visited last month? It's near there." This concrete detail seemed to comfort her slightly. "The one with the really good ice cream shop?" "That's the one," I confirmed, smiling. "When are you leaving?" Her small voice had grown smaller, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. "This weekend," Ryan answered when I hesitated. "But it's not leaving, Emma. It's just changing where Grandma sleeps and keeps her things. Emma was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this information. Can I see your new place? Before you move there? Of course, I said quickly. In fact, I'd love for you to help me decide where to put things. You have an excellent eye for decoration. This small acknowledgement of her input seemed to shift something in her expression. Could I have my own special spot there? Like I have Grandma's corner here? She pointed to the reading nook we had created together in the living room, with its small bookshelf and child-sized armchair. Absolutely, I said, relief flooding through me at this sign of acceptance. We'll create an even better Grandma's corner in the new apartment, just for you. Emma nodded, her initial distress giving way to cautious curiosity. Will you have a bathtub? Because sometimes Mommy needs me to shower really fast in the morning, but at your house, maybe I could take bubble baths again? The innocence of the question, the easy assumption that my home would still be partially hers, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Yes, sweetheart. There's a bathtub perfect for bubble baths. The conversation continued, Emma's questions becoming increasingly practical and specific. Would I take the cookie jar? Would her favorite books still be available? Could she leave her unicorn pajamas at both places? Each question reflected her attempt to map this new reality, to find her place within it. Finally, when her curiosity seemed temporarily satisfied, Ryan suggested it was time for her bath and bedtime routine. As they stood to leave the living room, Emma suddenly turned and flung herself into my arms, burying her face against my neck. I'm going to miss you being here all the time, she whispered, her small body trembling slightly. I held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, memorizing the weight of her in my arms. I know, sweetheart. I'll miss you too. But we'll still have our special times together, I promise. She pulled back, studying my face with surprising intensity for a child her age. Pinky promise? I linked my little finger with hers solemnly. Pinky promise. Seemingly satisfied, she allowed Ryan to lead her toward the bathroom, chattering about which bubble bath she wanted to use. Vanessa and I were left alone in the living room, an awkward silence settling between us. That went better than I expected, she said finally. I nodded. Emma's adaptable, and we're not presenting it as a negative change, which helps. Vanessa hesitated, then asked, Are you really feeling positive about it? About all of this? The question surprised me. Throughout our recent negotiations, Vanessa had been the least emotionally engaged, focused primarily on practical considerations and damage control. This was the first time she'd expressed interest in my actual feelings. I'm nervous, I admitted. Starting over at my age isn't easy. But yes, I'm also excited, hopeful. It's been a long time since I've had independence, purpose beyond caretaking. Vanessa nodded slowly. I never really considered that before. Your needs, your identity outside of being Ryan's mother and Emma's grandmother. That was short-sighted of me. The acknowledgement, however belated, was unexpected and touching. Thank you for recognizing that. She twisted her wedding ring absently, seeming to struggle with her next words. I know I haven't been welcoming or appreciative. That's not who I want to be, especially for Emma. She adores you, and she notices everything. Children do, I agreed quietly. I don't want her growing up thinking that's how family treats each other, Vanessa continued. The way I've treated you, she deserves better examples. There was genuine regret in her voice, a self-awareness I hadn't given her credit for possessing. We all make mistakes, I offered. What matters is recognizing them and doing better. She met my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in our entire conversation. I want to do better, for Emma's sake and for all of us. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, not a tearful embrace or profound apology. But it was an opening. a small crack in the wall of tension and resentment that had defined our relationship for years. I accepted it for what it was, a beginning. The weekend arrived with startling swiftness. Saturday morning found me surrounded by boxes in the den-turned-bedroom, carefully wrapping the few treasures I'd managed to preserve through multiple downsizings. The porcelain figurine of a ballet dancer that had belonged to my mother. The small watercolor of Mount Hood that Mark had painted on our 10th anniversary. The hand-carved wooden box where I kept Emma's baby teeth, first drawings, locks of hair, from her initial haircut. Ryan appeared in the doorway, a stack of flattened moving boxes under his arm. "Need more?" he asked, his tone deliberately casual, as if we were engaged in something ordinary, rather than dismantling 5 years of shared living. "I think these will be enough," I replied, surveying the modest pile of packed belongings. "I told you I travel light these days." He set the extra boxes down anyway, then hesitated, shifting his weight awkwardly. "Mom, I've been thinking," he began, "about furniture, household stuff. You shouldn't have to start completely from scratch. Is there anything here you'd like to take? The reading chair maybe, or the guest room dresser?" The offer surprised me. We had agreed that Caroline would lend me staging furniture temporarily, and the financial settlement would cover purchasing necessities over time. "That's very generous," I said carefully, "but those are your things." Ryan shook his head. "Not all of them. The reading chair was from your house in Portland, and the guest room dresser. We bought that specifically for you when you moved in. It's yours if you want it." I hadn't expected this gesture, this acknowledgement that some pieces of our shared life rightfully belonged to me. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "The chair definitely. And yes, the dresser would be helpful." He nodded, seeming relieved to have this concrete way of supporting my transition. "I'll make sure they're on the truck tomorrow, and..." He hesitated again. "I've been setting aside some kitchen things too. The good chef's knife you always use, a set of those stoneware plates you like, some decent pots and pans. Just basics to get you started." Tears pricked unexpectedly at my eyes. These small recognitions of my preferences, my daily routines, meant more than the larger financial settlement we had negotiated. They represented a kind of seeing that had been absent for too long. "That means a lot, Ryan. Thank you." He shrugged, embarrassed by the emotion in my voice. "It's the least I could do." He glanced around at the boxes, the half-emptied closet. "Do you need help with anything else right now?" "Actually," I said, seizing the moment of goodwill, "I could use some advice about Emma's space in the new apartment. I want to make sure it feels special, comfortable for her." Ryan's expression softened at the mention of his daughter. "She's been talking about it nonstop, you know. My spot at Grandma's new place. She's already planning which stuffed animals need to live there versus here." My heart lightened at this evidence of Emma's adaptation. I was thinking the alcove near the living room window. It gets good natural light, and I could put a small bookshelf, maybe a beanbag chair or floor cushions. "She'd love that," Ryan agreed. "And maybe some of those fairy lights she's obsessed with? The ones that look like tiny stars?" "Perfect," I said, making a mental note. "I want her to feel at home there, even though we'll see each other less often." A shadow crossed Ryan's face. "About that," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Vanessa and I have been talking. We think the schedule we initially discussed, 3 afternoons a week, 1 weekend a month, might not be enough. For Emma or for you." I stilled, uncertain where this was heading. "What did you have in mind?" "Maybe 4 afternoons? And every other weekend?" he suggested. "Plus we thought, family dinner once a week? All of us together, either here or at your place once you're settled." The offer took my breath away. It was more than I had dared to hope for. a genuine attempt to preserve the closeness we had built while respecting my need for independence. "I would love that," I said simply, not hiding the emotion in my voice. Ryan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good, that's good. Emma will be thrilled." We continued sorting and packing in companionable silence for a while, the atmosphere between us lighter than it had been in months. Eventually, Ryan spoke again, his voice contemplative. "You know, when you first told us you wanted to leave, I thought it was about punishing us. For taking you for granted, for the babysitter comment, all of it." I looked up from the book I was wrapping in newspaper. "It wasn't about punishment, Ryan. It was about self-preservation." "I understand." "That now," he said quietly. "And I've been thinking a lot about why it was so hard for me to see that initially." He set down the box he was taping and met my eyes directly. I think part of me was still a child, still expecting my mother to exist primarily, in relation to my needs. Which is ironic, because I'm raising Emma to be independent, to understand that other people have their own lives and feelings. The insight surprised me with its depth. "That's a very perceptive observation." He shrugged, embarrassed again. "Well, therapy is good for something, I guess." "You're seeing a therapist?" This was news to me. "Started last week, Vanessa too, separately." He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous gesture from childhood. "We've got some issues to work through, individually and as a couple. This situation with you, it forced us to look at patterns we'd been ignoring. How we treat each other, how we manage our relationship with Emma. It's been illuminating." Pride swelled in my chest, unexpected and powerful. My son was doing the difficult work of self-examination, of growth. Whatever mistakes I had made as a parent, and there had been many, I had somehow raised a man capable of recognizing his flaws and seeking to address them. "I'm proud of you," I said simply. "That takes courage." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I had a good example. You're doing the scariest thing of all, starting over completely at an age when most people are settling in. If you can do that, I can certainly manage a few uncomfortable therapy sessions." We returned to our tasks, the conversation shifting to more practical matters. Timing for the move tomorrow, what to order for dinner that night, whether Emma should come to the new apartment during the initial setup or wait until things were more organized. But something had shifted between us, a new understanding taking root. By evening, my packing was complete, the den looking strangely impersonal with my possessions boxed away. Emma insisted on a special last night sleepover, dragging her sleeping bag into my room and setting it up beside my bed. We read extra stories, made shadow puppets on the wall with a flashlight, whispered secrets long after her official bedtime. I memorized each giggle, each sleepy question, storing them away as treasures for the quieter nights ahead. As Emma finally drifted off to sleep, her small hand still clutching mine, I allowed myself to fully feel the bittersweetness of this transition. There would be losses, the daily intimacies, the casual moments of connection that come from shared living space. But there would be gains too: dignity, independence, the chance to redefine myself beyond the narrow roles I had inhabited for too long. Tomorrow, I would walk into an empty apartment and begin the process of making it mine. There would be practical challenges, emotional adjustments, moments of doubt and loneliness. But for the first time in years, I was moving toward something rather than simply enduring what was. That knowledge, that sense of agency and purpose, was worth whatever difficulties lay ahead. Emma stirred in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent, before settling again. I watched her peaceful face in the dim light, this child who had been the center of my world for 6 years and would remain the center of my heart regardless of where I lived. "Sweet dreams, little one," I whispered. "Grandma loves you. Always." 6 months passed like the turning of seasons, both faster and slower than I could have imagined. My apartment gradually transformed from an impersonal space filled with borrowed furniture to a true reflection of myself. The walls, once stark white, now showcased framed prints I'd carefully selected, a watercolor of Portland's Japanese garden, a black and white photograph of Chicago's skyline at dusk, and most treasured of all, Emma's increasingly sophisticated artwork, properly matted and displayed with museum-worthy respect. The promised Emma's Corner evolved from concept to reality, more elaborate than I'd initially envisioned. The alcove near the living room window now featured a child-sized armchair upholstered in rainbow-patterned fabric, a small bookshelf filled with her favorites, and an art supply caddy stocked with quality materials. Fairy lights twinkled along the ceiling, creating a canopy of gentle stars. When Emma first saw it, her eyes widened with wonder before she threw herself into my arms with a squeal of delight. "It's perfect, Grandma. Can I come over right now? Can I stay forever?" My work with Caroline flourished beyond my cautious hopes. What began as part-time staging assistance quickly expanded as my confidence returned and my design instincts reawakened. By month 3, I was managing entire projects independently, meeting with real estate agents and homeowners, transforming empty houses into spaces potential buyers could envision as homes. One particularly successful staging led to a client requesting my services for their new home purchase, my first independent design contract in over 5 years. "I told you," Caroline remarked with satisfied pride as we celebrated over lunch. "Your aesthetic isn't outdated. It's timeless. People respond to authenticity, to spaces that feel genuinely livable rather than Instagram perfect." The income from my growing work allowed me to gradually replace Caroline's loaned furniture with pieces I chose myself, not expensive or trendy, but meaningful. A secondhand desk refinished by my own hands. A reading chair discovered at a neighborhood estate sale, reupholstered in deep teal fabric that reminded me of the Oregon coast. Small, deliberate choices that accumulated into a home that felt unmistakably mine. My relationship with Emma evolved too, deepening in unexpected ways despite seeing her less frequently. Our time together became more intentional, more focused. Without the constant presence that had sometimes made me invisible to her, our scheduled visits took on a special quality. She arrived at my apartment bursting with stories, observations, things she'd saved specifically to show me. I listened with a presence and attention that had sometimes been difficult to maintain amid the daily demands of full-time caregiving. The agreed-upon schedule, 4 afternoons a week, every other weekend, weekly family dinners, remained consistent, providing Emma with the stability children crave. But within that framework, we found new rhythms, new traditions. Saturday morning pancakes became sacred ritual, as did our city adventures, where we'd explore a new neighborhood or attraction each month. For her 7th birthday, I took her to the Children's Theater for her first live performance. Her wonder at the experience a gift I treasured more than any material present. My relationship with Ryan underwent its own transformation, painful at times, but ultimately healing. The weekly family dinners, initially awkward affairs filled with overly polite conversation, gradually relaxed into something more authentic. Sometimes we gathered at their apartment, sometimes at mine. Emma delighted in playing hostess when the dinners were held at Grandma's place, setting the table with exaggerated formality and beaming with pride. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed following dinner at their home, Ryan pulled out a bottle of good scotch, Mark's favorite. "Dad's tradition," he said simply, pouring 2 glasses and handing one to me. "I think he'd approve of us taking a moment to acknowledge how far we've come." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping the amber liquid that tasted of memories and lost time. Then Ryan spoke, his voice reflective. "I keep thinking about patterns, how easy it is to repeat them without realizing. Dad worked so hard to provide for us that he sometimes forgot to be present. I swore I wouldn't make the same mistake with Emma, but instead I made a different one. I outsourced her care entirely to you, convinced myself that was better somehow. I considered his words carefully. We all make choices based on the information and awareness we have at the time. The important thing is recognizing when those choices aren't serving us, or the people we love, anymore. Therapy talking points? He asked with a rueful smile. I laughed softly. Maybe some of my own hard-won wisdom, too. Ryan swirled, the scotch in his glass, watching the light play through it. I've been thinking lately about what I want Emma to learn from all this. Not the conflict part, but what came after. The rebuilding. What do you hope she learns? I asked, genuinely curious. That it's never too late to stand up for yourself. That family relationships can survive difficult truths. That love doesn't mean martyrdom or exploitation. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. That her grandmother is one of the strongest, most resilient people I know. Tears pricked behind my eyes, unexpected and warming. Thank you for seeing that, I said simply. My relationship with Vanessa evolved most surprisingly of all. The initial frostiness that followed my departure gradually thawed as she witnessed the positive effects of our new arrangement, not just on Emma, but on Ryan as well. The first genuine breakthrough came unexpectedly, through professional connection rather than family ties. One of my clients, a woman downsizing after divorce, mentioned needing marketing assistance for her small business. Nothing fancy, she explained, just a website refresh and some social media strategy. Know anyone reliable? Without overthinking it, I suggested Vanessa, who had been contemplating freelance work to supplement her agency position. The recommendation led to a successful project, then another. One evening after a family dinner, Vanessa lingered after Ryan took Emma upstairs for bedtime. I wanted to thank you, she said, her usual polish softened by genuine emotion. For the client referrals, you didn't have to do that. You're good at what you do, I replied honestly. It made sense. She hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic vulnerability. I haven't been good at everything, though, especially not as a daughter-in-law. I think I was threatened by your relationship with Emma. With Ryan, too. It felt easier to push you away than to make space for you. The admission stunned me with its directness and self-awareness. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It means a lot. We weren't suddenly best friends, Vanessa and I, but a door had opened, allowing for the possibility of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than competition and resentment. Not everything was smooth transformation and healing epiphanies, of course. There were difficult days, lonely nights when the silence of my apartment pressed in around me, moments when I questioned my decision, when the independence I'd fought for felt more like isolation. Holidays brought particular challenges, negotiating time with Emma, navigating new traditions while honoring old ones, managing the complex emotions that family gatherings invariably stirred. The first Christmas in my new apartment arrived with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. We had agreed that Emma would spend Christmas Eve with Ryan and Vanessa, then come to my place Christmas morning for our own celebration before we all gathered for dinner at their apartment. It seemed a reasonable compromise, but as I placed carefully wrapped presents under my modest tree on Christmas Eve alone, a familiar melancholy settled over me. The silence was broken by an unexpected knock at my door. I opened it to find Ryan, Vanessa, and Emma, all bundled in winter coats with snowflakes melting in their hair. "Surprise, Grandma!" Emma exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. "We're going! Caroling and we need you." I blinked in confusion. Caroling? It was Emma's idea, Ryan explained. She said it wouldn't be Christmas Eve without you. We thought maybe we could start a new tradition, caroling as a family, then hot chocolate, at our place before Emma goes to bed. The invitation, so simple, so inclusive, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I'd love that," I managed. "Just let me get my coat." As we wandered the neighborhood together, our breaths visible in the cold night air, Emma's clear voice leading us through somewhat mangled versions of classic carols, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This wasn't the family configuration I had imagined for my later years, not the smooth, uncomplicated closeness I had once naively expected. It was messier, more complex, shaped by conflict and compromise, by hard truths and harder growth. But it was real. Authentic in a way our previous arrangement had never been, because it was built on mutual respect rather than exploitation, on clear boundaries rather than silent resentment. On my 60th birthday, 2 weeks after that Christmas, I stood in my kitchen preparing for the small celebration I had planned. Caroline would be coming, along with a few new friends from my building and neighborhood. Ryan, Vanessa, and Emma would arrive later, after Emma's ballet lesson. It would be the first birthday in years that actually centered around what I wanted: a simple gathering with good food, meaningful conversation, no pretense. As I arranged cheeses on a serving board, my phone buzzed with a text message from Ryan. "Running a bit late. Emma insists on stopping for flowers. See you soon. Love you, Mom." Such a small thing, that last phrase added to an ordinary text, yet it filled me with a quiet joy. Not because I needed my son's approval or affection to validate my choices, but because it signified the healing that was possible, the new relationship we were building on more equal footing. I glanced around my apartment, this space that had transformed from an empty shell to a true reflection of myself. The furniture arranged for conversation and comfort, the walls adorned with art that spoke to my aesthetic, my experiences. The kitchen where I cooked what I wanted, when I wanted. The door I could close when I needed solitude. At 59, I had stood in my son's living room and heard myself introduced as the babysitter, the final indignity that crystallized years of gradual erasure. At 60, I stood in my own home, a woman with boundaries and agency, with meaningful work and authentic relationships, with a future shaped by my own choices rather than others' expectations. The journey had been painful, frightening at times. The path forward would continue to hold challenges. Aging brought its own complications, and family relationships were never simple. But I had reclaimed something precious: my voice, my identity. Beyond caretaking roles, my right to exist as a complete person with needs and dreams of my own. As I placed a single candle in the center of the cake I'd baked myself, simple, elegant, exactly to my taste, I smiled at the woman I had become. Not despite the hurt and conflict, but because of the courage it had taken to move through it, to demand better, to begin again. Some might call it a late blooming, this reclamation of self at 60. I preferred to think of it as right on time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.